We're back, ladies and gentlemen. Your host here, Hassan Haydar, with my co-host, Ryan George. And today we got a guest. Mr. Jason Brown is in the building.
What up?
We're going to get into it today. We're going to find out about Jason Brown. He's a mysterious guy. You'll see him walking around, floating around. I won't even say walking around, floating around. It's probably more of an accurate description. Floating around, appearing into spaces and then disappearing from spaces as well. I think is a accurate characterization of what you do. But yeah, why don't you go ahead and, I don't know, start the story where you want to start, and we'll ask some questions to dig deep. Where do you think is an appropriate place to start? Where would you say, like, if we were going to write a comic book titled Jason Brown and it's the origin story?
The origin story.
Yeah.
Ooh, okay, good. Because I want to know more about the origin.
About origin stories,
like, my biggest question is how like a kid from St. Catharines ended up in Silicon Valley. Was that always the plan, or it just happened? Because I know things just happen in your life, so I want to know how they happen.
No, there's no plan. I'm definitely not a planner. I was always based in Toronto, but I was very drawn to startups and CEOs.
Okay,
and I realized through my journey, it's like there's these other games within the games. And I just realized, like, wait a minute, I'm around startups that are based in Canada and they think in millions. And then Silicon Valley thinks in billions. So it's like, it's the same effort to play the million game. So why don't I go where the big boys are playing and see if I can hang?
Interesting.
Well, around what year is this? Like, you guys remember, I'm a lot younger than you are.
Yeah.
So, I mean, whatever work you did probably impacted my life indirectly, right? If you're working in Silicon Valley, I'm like, we're both millennial babies. So we grew up not knowing a world pre-internet. You know a world pre-internet.
Oh, yeah.
So you know, like, what the landscape was like.
You were part of the .com era then, yeah?
Totally.
Yeah, of course.
I have credits in high school from typewriter class.
What?
Like, click, 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 click. Yeah. Okay. Seriously.
Right.
Yeah.
So typewriter class. So when did, like, at what point in your life did you realize the internet was going to be it?
That was it. I realized this internet's going to be a thing. So there's a scene in my life where one of my mentors came to visit me because I was at that time working at Nike.
Gotcha.
In Yorkville.
Gotcha.
Where that giant rock is, if you go there.
Okay,
I'm always hanging out there. Okay. We launched the first Nike store outside of the US ever.
That is crazy.
Okay. And I was part of that team. And my mentor, who created the sports management program that I went to school for, because I graduated #1.
Okay.
And I became really good friends with the guy that created the whole program.
Wow.
So he was like one of my first mentors.
Gotcha.
And he came to visit me and he's like, "What are you doing?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "What do you mean?" I'm like, at Nike. This is what I said I wanted to do. That was like one of the only times in my life I put a plan out.
Yeah.
I was like, I'm going to work for Nike, and I went at Nike and I went and did it.
Yeah. You're going to do sports management in university? Go work for Nike.
Go work for Nike.
Interesting.
But what I realized while I was working for Nike, because I was also always at the Raptor games with Nike, is that I didn't want to be around the team. I didn't want to be around the agents. A lot of the guys I went to school with were already starting to try to be an agent. I was around actual agents and I was like, that life sucks. And I realized I wanted to sit in the front row, which means you wanted to be the CEO. And I realized that Nike, it was Phil Knight that I was attracted to, not actually working at Nike, which was just another retail company.
Interesting.
And I was like, it's actually Phil Knight I've been reading about all this time. It's his journey and his book that I read before his new one that came out more recently. And so it was that path. So I was like, this is my path.
Yeah.
And my mentor was like, get out of sports. He's like, you're way beyond that.
Wow.
And he's like, you need to do something else. You can do so much more. And I said to him, I think this internet thing might be a thing.
That's so crazy. What year is this?
Like 94, 95.
Wow.
Dude, my mind's blown.
96, somewhere in there.
94, I was 1 year old.
94, you were 1?
Yeah. I was born in 93. I'm a 93 baby.
I was 6.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, like,
you're in 1994, you're going like, I think this internet thing might be
a thing.
And you're at this point, what is the internet like?
Okay, so first of all, like, even an internet job board, that was like brand new.
Yeah.
Right?
Like job postings?
Yes.
Okay.
Like using the internet to get a job was brand new.
Up?
So what I started doing was I went to all these recruiting companies. They would advertise in the paper, because back then, almost all jobs, they were advertised in like giant career section on Saturday in the Toronto Star. It would be like its own insert. It would be massive.
Yeah.
Every company would be in there.
And these are all the openings.
And you'd see all these recruitment companies posting IT jobs that I had no idea what these things meant, like Java. and like object-oriented programming and all like this words I didn't even know.
Really technical.
Right. But
stuff.
you keep reading about Silicon Valley, you keep reading about .com. It's starting to percolate.
Yeah.
They're getting like this thing called funding. I'm like, what's that? And there's like venture capital starts becoming a word. And I'm like, what's that? And so I start going to all these recruitment companies being like, I want to get placed for that job. And they're like, you don't know how to program anything. I'm like, yeah, dude, I have a typewriting credit from high school. Right? Okay. It's like, no, I don't. But what happened was every recruiting company, they'd be like, you're insane. We can't send you on as an applicant, but do you want to be a recruiter?
Okay.
And I'd be like, God, no, why would I want that job? That sounds terrible. Right. Cause it was like headhunting. It was like way negative back then. And then one day I walked into a firm in Yorkville and I opened the door and I was like, whoa, what's going on? Wicked style. I was like, this place is cool.
Yeah.
There's so many good looking people walking around and they just make you sit there. And I'm like, what is this place? And then they make you do tests like Google does now.
Yeah.
So I had to write all these tests and they do this one test that gives you a score. And so I just do the test and they still make you sit there. And like the main secretary woman up front, Marcia, she's amazing. And she'll interact with you. Marcia. It's like a scene of a movie, right?
Yeah. I'm literally picturing like a scene out of a movie.
It feels more like it's like an advertising agency. That's what it looks like. Yeah. And I'm like, what is going on? This looks so different than all those like, greasy recruiting companies I was going to check out before.
Yeah, because like tech was like really the first kind of place to be like,
first place.
Let's make it look cool. Let's make the office look cool.
And so these guys were doing that. And I was like, something's different here. And then Marcia says, wait here. You have to meet with this like VP of whatever.
Yeah.
So he comes out, we go into a room. He's all serious. He's in a suit and he's like, okay, we have a problem. And I was like, what? And he's like, we've been running this test for like 6 years. I have the highest score and you just shattered it.
Whoa. What kind of test is this?
Yeah, what is it?
It's like an
IQ test?
it's a mix of a bunch of stuff. It's kind of like what Google does, right? And he's like, here's the deal. We can't hire you for the job you came in for. He's like, because we thought you were like in your 30s and I wasn't in my 30s yet.
Yeah.
And he's like, but we're going to offer you a job and figure it out on Monday.
Wow.
And I was just like, boom.
So, based on your age, they're like, you're too young. We can't actually give you this job because back then that was still a thing.
That was totally
if you had no experience, they're like, it doesn't matter how smart you are. You have to be a certain age. Isn't that crazy?
Also not seasoned, right? Like you don't know anything.
I didn't know anything.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Right? But they're like,
he just got the highest score. He beat the CEO.
So they're like, we hire talent here.
Amazing.
And then we figured it out.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just started working in this like group called the Business Development Group.
Wow.
And it was to like do sales for their company, but they were a recruitment company that had 4 companies underneath it.
So they're a recruitment company. Their main focus is headhunting.
Yes, but they also started doing IT consulting, like contract consulting, which no one was doing back then. Now it's the norm.
Yeah.
But back then, if you went to go work at a company and just do IT by the hour on a project for 3 months, that was brand new. It didn't used to be that way.
Of course.
So they basically started all that.
Wow.
And then they were working with Nortel. In all the cities Nortel launched, we launched. And so the company was like printing money. It was super successful.
Yeah.
We had a recruitment advertising division to help with all the advertising because you started doing internet was still rare.
Yeah.
So you'd still do it by the paper.
You're still doing it by print.
So we had an actual ad agency that we would sell for.
Wow.
We had the first internet job board ever called Position Watch that my team would sell for that.
Oh.
And then we would sell like the recruit. So our goal was to go find new companies.
Tell them go on Position Watch.
Yep.
Put your shit on Position Watch.
Yeah. But what I realized was Silicon Valley was funding new startups and they needed loads of developers. And so I started telling my boss that we had it all backwards and we should be totally going after these companies, but they couldn't meet the financial requirements for them to get through our accounting process.
Yeah.
Because they just got funded. They were like a brand new startup. They don't have any financial history.
Yeah.
And so I convinced them to let one of them in and they immediately hired 40 developers. And then the boss, the guy that created all the company, he got wind of that. And so this is like mentor number 2.
Yeah.
And so he calls me into his office and I go in there and it's like wicked. It's like, like the double doors for the scotch and like the couches.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sitting at his desk and he's barely paying attention, doing his thing. And then he asks me, what do you think about like our company and how we do sales? And I'm like, yeah, it's completely backwards. And I would totally do it differently. And he's like, what?
Yeah.
And he picks up the phone, he phones Marcia and he's like, cancel my meeting. He goes over to the couch like a movie, opens up the double doors, gets out scotch, says, sit down. We go sit on the couch like this. And he's like, tell me everything you've observed. And I told him that we're missing out on new tech. Like we're friggin' tech recruiting and we're missing out these new funded companies.
Yeah.
And he's like, okay, go start a team, find 7 guys like you and go after that. And so like within weeks of me starting there, I had my own team.
That's insane.
And that's how I learned tech because I didn't know anything. I didn't even know what these words meant. Like
that's so
object-oriented programming.
What would you say, like what qualities did you have that gave you the advantage? Like
the gift, the gab for sure.
Yeah.
But also just seeing these patterns.
Yeah.
Whereas like I would walk around and I was introduced to all these like men and women that worked there. They were making hundreds of thousands of dollars doing recruiting. I didn't even think that was possible.
Mm-hmm.
So learning what professional sales was and that this was real. And I was watching guys like have, $300,000 months. And I was like, that's possible. Like I didn't even know what an account manager was. I didn't realize that was like an amazing career. Yeah. And at the same time, so we had really professional, like long-term sales guys crushing it. I was watching that while also learning all about the tech companies that we were having as clients. So I had to learn that. And then we're placing technical geeks in all these companies. So you start kind of through osmosis, learning how all these different games work.
Interesting.
But then we're also going after the companies that just got funded from all that .com money. So I was going to visit them and I'm starting to learn this whole underbelly game. And that got me into sales. That got me to understand how to be an account manager, how to have a team, how to actually do professional sales, like long-term sales cycle and just all of it.
Yeah.
And then when I realized, like, I remember the sales guys, the top guys, they took me to Vegas, right? And we're at a blackjack table and they're like tipping with 100 coins.
And your mind is blown.
And I'm like buying $10 ones.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, the waitress comes by and gives us a drink and they're like just throwing it on her tray. And I was just like, there's a whole other world here. Like these guys are making a couple $100,000 a month. And I'm like, that's possible. And I would hang out with them and I'd be like, you're not overtly intelligent or have any special skill, but they had like this drive. They realized that there's a game within the game. They started understanding the game and they loved it. And they're like, can you believe that this exists? And they're like, do you realize there's guys like this in almost every company in the world? And that sales is an actual powerful career. And like, we used to make the joke, people would be like, the parents would be like, why don't you become a doctor? And we would say, we don't want the pay cut.
Yeah.
It's true though. Because
sales guys make fucking dope.
Yeah. The sales reps
sales guys
make us so much money.
You
so
get paid
much
on commission, especially you're talking about the beginning of the internet age. Like,
it was crazy.
Because there's no one knows what's going on, but the internet is really like, in hindsight, that it just turned everything upside down.
Turned it all upside down. And that growth of needing all those developers to build out so every company in the world needed internet something. And then Y2K was also happening.
Yeah.
Oh, right. Y2K.
So every old ass company in the world needed suddenly a whole bunch of IT guys. Yeah. When they didn't even know what these guys were.
They needed developers. They needed sales guys who also understood what the software was. So we were like, explain it to people.
We were on fire.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, one of the coolest parts about this is the guy that owns it is Jeff Stober. That's who created the Drake hotels. That's who created all the Drake properties.
Oh.
And so when he built the Drake after he cashed out with this company, that was his pet fun project.
The Drake.
And so think about what the Drake looks like if you've been there.
Yep.
That's why when I walked in that office, I was like, something's different here.
Oh. So his office, the Drake looks like the old office kind of.
Yeah. And it was that kind of vibe and cool people. And like, he had this knack of finding people that didn't grow up in that certain type of pedigree or whatever and put them in positions like this to be like, do you see like there's this whole other life here that's possible? That you could go well into 6 figures early in your life and just be part of this family. And it was a wild, wild ride because we rode up with Nortel. And then Nortel, you guys are probably too young to remember this, but they were like Google at the time. Like they're huge Canadian company, hugest company in the world. And they had a massive stock thing. And then it all crumbled so fast. That's what really brought down the .com boom to go to Boston.
Nortel's a Canadian company, right? Yep. And they were massive. I've like vaguely remember about them. They're still around, right? Mm-hmm. They're still around. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was like this. So I went through this wild ride where we were hiring so many people all the time, even for our own company. And then the crash happened. And then we had to start firing them all.
Oh, yes.
So I went through that whole .com and the Y2K.
That's crazy.
So it was all happening. I'm learning sales. I'm learning that there's these whole other games. I'm understanding how funding works with all these startups. I watched them come to life, get funding, crash, blow up. I watched the biggest company in our country just get slaughtered and just basically almost disappear overnight. And we went from having hundreds of people that we were hiring to then letting them all go months later.
Wow.
It was like this wild ride. I'm not even 30 yet. It was
That's great. So like,
it was like,
it's such a different world because now it's like, it's all digital. You don't have this experience. You can't do this. Companies don't do this. They don't just take a chance on a kid who got good on did well on a score, a test score. And they're like, yeah, we'll bring you on. We'll give you a chance, kid. Yeah. No educational background, no formal training, no nothing.
Nothing.
You just walk in.
Yeah.
And here you go. And also you're learning hands-on by being in the environment. Now everyone just sits at a computer all day, absorbing as much information as they can, but they don't have any practical knowledge or experience. I can sit and learn anything online.
Yeah.
Literally. But it's different when you're doing it in person and you're getting the behind the scenes. I was
behind the scenes of multiple things at the same time.
That's crazy.
So I was learning that all the scenes are their own scene and they have their own game and their own rules and like status and politics and what people are chasing. And I got to see it all at a different level of success than I grew up with.
Right.
But also seeing where people's allegiances were, what the false idols were. You start to see it, right? And you start to see where people are living these multiple lives, or their home life is very different than when we're out schmoozing the client life.
It's like Wolf of Wall Street,
totally,
right?
Like,
That's what comes
that
to
one was
mind.
pretty
It's
extreme,
like
but I've seen watching
are.
that movie and then watching Hangover.
Yeah.
And people are going crazy for those two movies. When I watched both those movies, like I was like, yeah,
that's life.
Like that used to be my job, basically.
That's crazy
to act like that in some ways.
That's nuts.
I mean,
it was like Mad Men. We would drink at lunch almost every day.
I have friends who are in tech sales right now. That's their life. Like their job is to take the client out, have a good time, go out for drinks, go out to the club, show them a good time, and make sure they keep using the software or they're buying the new software.
It's a lot like the consultancy world too. Like my cousin's a consultant, same thing. Travels around the world. You gotta,
schmoozing.
Exactly.
So you get the team. You now have a team. What happens after that point? You got a team to yourself now. You're gonna be going and
we had our own floor.
Whoa.
We had the basketball net in my office, the couch.
Oh, sick.
Amazing.
It was wild.
Yeah.
But we were also wild because we were all young.
Yeah.
And
making a shit ton of money.
Making more money than we thought was possible.
Yeah.
And wearing bad suits, thinking we're cool.
Yeah.
I can't picture you in a suit. Right? That's the funniest part.
It's amazing. I used to always wear a suit. And then we'd be hanging out in Yorkville because that's where the office was. And then one of my good friends, he was a liquor rep.
Yeah.
And so he would host these parties to launch a brand. And then we would just show up.
Yeah.
And so that was like a couple times a week.
Yeah.
It was just the scene. It was like, you feel like you're part of something. You got this team, there's camaraderie, and you're in the job of schmoozing and landing deals. And you start realizing that there's like this attraction to the deal.
Yeah.
But you also start realizing it's all people's egos. And so like to get a deal done, you have to massage all these egos, your team, all the players, their players, all emotional.
How do you develop those skills? Because I can relate to that. I manage a lot of people right now. That's like my job. I'm a manager. So it's all about stroking people's egos the right way to get them all kind of to work symbiotically with each other. How do you think you learned that skill, or is that something you developed, or like something you had like a knack for? You always had a knack for that.
I think both. It's like seeing the puzzle before it's finished.
Yeah.
And what I realized watching the top sales guys was a lot of times their life would get in the way of the deal. And you could like feel the desperation, even though these guys are crushing it.
Okay.
Something in their life is making them not crush it. And now that's like, oh, I got to pay alimony. I better get this deal. And you could see that tension come into the deal.
Yeah.
And so what I realized was on the other side of the table, their goals mattered more than ours as salespeople. If you want your deal done, you actually have to align with how they keep score, not how you keep score. And when you start to pay attention more to how your client keeps score, then helping them win, you naturally get your win.
Yeah.
If you focus on how you keep score, that doesn't mean it aligns with the client.
Yeah.
And so I switched it around and started realizing like, what do they need? And then you start realizing their motivations. And then the whole point is, how close can I get to their motivations being done? Because they're incentive laden, especially a lot of these big companies. It's not the top guys making the decisions. So it's a lot of people where status is more important to them, covering their ass is more important to them. And they can't comprehend when we're like, hey, if you close this deal for me, I'm going to make 500 grand. Like, you can't tell them that.
You can't tell them that. Like, they're not going to trust you at all.
It's like 20 times more than they make in a year.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have to let it go. And so you have to learn to like let the deal flow through their incentive structure and what they need. And that getting them closer to what they need is actually going to pull you through.
You kind of have to detach.
So you got to get, it's like getting out of your own way a little bit.
Yeah, you got to detach from the incentive.
A little bit of detachment, which is hilarious because now that leads into kind of how life is now, right?
Very like psychological based too. Like you really have to understand the human psyche.
Yes.
And it's, that's so fucking, that's wild.
It's a wild game. And then, yeah, it's like you're schmoozing. Sometimes deals would take a very long time. Yeah. And so like, you're getting to know somebody and you start realizing like, wow, as my life is interesting, they're interested because their life isn't. They're being schmoozed like once a week. I'm doing this every day, just cycling through different clients.
So they feel special and it's like a look into another world.
Yep.
And that's what keeps them coming back. You get some
bonding there. Yeah.
Okay.
It's wild. I've had a few top executives' wives turn to their husband and be like, do the deal. Because they're having such a great time at some fucking Michelin star restaurant we took them to or whatever.
Yeah. That's
funny. But like, it's so funny.
We're all people, man.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
They're in their own game. And she's like, we like Jason. So just like, honey, just do the deal.
Just do the deal.
Because we're all human. Like the motivations to do stuff as a human is always so like, it could be so primal. Well, it could be the most basic thing. Like he said, they're having fun. Fuck it, do the deal.
So that's but that's the thing is like what I've realized through all of this and even Silicon Valley. Okay. It's like we make up these words like venture capital, funding, startup. I'm a founder. It's like, no, you're not. We're humans playing a game. And so what are you? Are you human first or are you the VC first? No, most of us will put our programming ahead of that. Right.
Interesting.
We take on these identities and we think it's actually us. And it's not. It's just like, it's just a game that we made up.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And then there's games within the games.
Yeah. It's funny because like I recently heard David Cho on Joe Rogan talking about how like life is just a game.
Yeah.
He's like, I was basically broke and I was like, okay, how do I win the game of being
of making money?
An artist.
Yeah. Yeah.
And how do I
the most financial in the world,
successful artist in the world. Okay, cool. I won that game. Now, how do I win the game of getting laid? Because he was really bad with girls.
Yeah.
So he literally wrote like jokes and pickup line and things like he finessed it to the point where he knew a combination of sentences he could put together that would guarantee land him like a girl. And it was just like, I won that game. I got bored. What's the next game? And now he's just like, I'm going to move to Africa and live off the land because I don't know what's left, but it's all a game.
I resonate with that because for me, it's the same. It's like, I saw these games. I saw multiple games at the same time. Then I stayed in sales and got to I started working for even hotter companies. And I even got to the point where I was in a startup that got acquired by IBM for $2 billion. So that was like the first unicorn.
Is that the biggest deal? I was just about what was the biggest deal you've ever seen go down?
That was really big at the time.
Yeah.
Because like startups getting acquired for a couple of billion was still really, really rare.
Yeah,
and for IBM, it was a big deal. So think about them. They're like this big behemoth.
Yeah.
And so then I got to see what's that like being part of a company that gets acquired for that, but then goes to the behemoth where everyone there is in a different game.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the same industry.
But it's not.
But they're living a completely different life.
Interesting.
Yeah. And then to go to another Silicon Valley startup that again became unicorn really, really fast and see that from the inside, that thinking in billions versus thinking in millions.
Right.
And then you see the game within that game. And to be around actual billionaires and like hang out with them and see their life. Watch them walk around where you got to like hang out with their security detail a little bit and get to know them. And it's just like, you get to see their life behind the scenes. And then you realize, fuck, it's not it. You think it's it. But I've been around so many people that have crushed it at the certain games that we all think we're playing.
Yeah.
And I've seen all these different games and I've seen the pinnacle players in those games.
Yeah.
And every time I was around it and I would get close to it and I'd be like, I'm here because I think I want where you are. And then I would observe and be like, fuck, that's not it. It's not it. And so you can get distracted by the game as well. And what I realized was we're caught up in these games. They keep us entertained, but they also keep us distracted. And we think that the meaning is there. And then when you achieve the scores in the game, what happens is you get the score and maybe you celebrate for a night or two. And then you're like, okay, when's the next season start?
Right.
When's the next game start? because it's not actually fulfilling because we have it backwards. Because I was looking at it's always outside of me. And I was watching all these games, trying to find the game to play in, not realizing that game is inward. And so I got exposed to all these different games and all these different success and people that were crushing it way above where I was. But by seeing how they were playing their life, I was realizing, man, it doesn't matter what you accumulate because it starts inside. And eventually I ran out of games to look at and was like, okay, the last game is let's go in. Let's see what happens there, because it makes no sense to keep going this way, because I've been around the top of the game and they're not at the top of life. And so I'm in the wrong game.
From an outsider's perspective, you look at that and you're like, oh, they're winning at life. They're billions of dollars, private jets, parties, celebrities, all that stuff. But like you being able to see what it's like on the other side of that, being in those environments, you can see what it's actually like.
Yes.
I'm interested what your perspective was, because you said you hung out with a bunch of billionaires. Yeah. What was your perspective, like meeting them, interacting with them? Mm-hmm. Do you feel like they were different? Do you feel like they all think in a certain type of way?
No, they definitely see the world differently.
Okay. What are like, give me some insights. Like how are they different? What are
you can feel the intelligence, you can feel the wheels turning.
Okay.
And you can feel them calculating and readjusting at all times. Like reading the room at a whole other level. And so I love that.
Yeah.
And it's something I noticed Elon does too. You know, how he pauses before he answers.
A lot. Yeah.
Yeah. So I witnessed that too. Yeah. It's like the contemplation, the ability to contemplate in real time and take action.
Yeah.
So like I noticed with like me quite often, I need longer contemplation time. I want to go for a walk and think about it, think it through. But I've watched other really what we would deem as successful in that 3D world. I watch them and their ability to calculate and readjust so quickly is like amazing. So I noticed that as a trend.
Yeah,
for sure. But also, I never saw them be able to turn it off.
So that's what I was. So you never felt like they were ever at, like they feel like they're always being watched, basically, or they're always on a pedestal, or they have to act a certain way, or like what?
It's always trying to achieve the next thing. Right, you're high level problem solving. It's like, how do I get more money? How do I get this deal? How do I close this? I got this client relationship happening. I got this, all these things. You're always calculating what's happening, where your money is, what's happening to it, how it's being managed. So you can't actually enjoy yourself from what it seems like, because you're just always trying to figure out how to make more, how to sustain the life you have, and how to get more businesses and more wins, because you get addicted to the win.
Well, it's not turned off. So they were never surprised by where they were at.
Yeah.
And we're observing them from they're somewhere where we want to be. But they're not there anymore. They're already gone ahead in their mind.
Yeah. So they're never really present, because they're always thinking about what's in the future.
I always felt like
what's coming up next.
Yeah, the top people that I've seen at their craft, they are very present.
That's what I was going to say.
Because they're constantly calculating. Very present.
Because you don't have to worry about anything at that point. You've reached such a point.
Aren't you thinking about all the things that still need to get done? But you've only
reached that point from dealing with everything as it comes to you and dealing with it in the correct way.
Interesting.
At every single juncture. Because think about what it takes to become a billionaire. Yeah.
But
I really admired like being like, the few mentors I've had like that. Like there's just something about their ability to compute fast.
Interesting.
That I just love and admire, because like you can just say one thing and then that's a puzzle piece for them.
Interesting.
And so I feel like that happens in my life a lot too. It's like with all the following the nudges, it's like stuff comes up and it's like I'm carrying these puzzle pieces around and I don't yet know why.
Yeah.
And then something happens and you're just like, there it is. And now that pulls in 14 puzzle pieces I've been carrying for 2 years.
Love it. We're going to get into that.
Yeah.
I'm going to reset the cameras.
Yeah, reset the camera.
And we're going to do that.
Okay, you said, I got to go inwards.
Yeah.
What, like, is there a specific moment where you're like, boom?
I know, because at the beginning you guys were like, where do you want to start?
Yes.
And so there's before drugs and after drugs.
All right.
Okay.
Right. Excellent.
Okay. And I'm saying drugs because it's something that we laugh about, because I'm in the Fit for Service community with Aubrey Marcus and his crew. And it's amazing. But there's a joke that we talk about. It's like we say, reverence for the plant medicine and taking the medicine. And I love that. And I feel it. But there's also a joke. It's like, how come you guys don't just say you're taking drugs?
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, so anyway, I think there's a lightness to all of this because every journey I've done, there's like this cosmic joke. It's like, there's something, it's like God, source, whatever words you want to use.
It's laughing at you.
It's like poking at you. It's funny. It's like a trickster. There's that energy every time. And maybe that's because that's part what's in me. And that's one of my Dharma things. But it's like, I notice that in every journey that it kind of fucks with me. And that's actually what gets through. Because it's just like, hey, man, you already know this. Like, you got this. Like, chill, have more fun. You made that part up. That it's supposed to be hard. That, you know, after the inner work, that you're just supposed to stay in this shadow, woe is me, I'm not allowed to celebrate life. And yet that is not the message I get when I'm in the journeys. In the journeys, it's like, yeah, man, celebrate, be overwhelming, be epic. And so when I went in the inward journey like that and got cracked open between breath work and psilocybin, it's like life before that and life after.
Got it.
Interesting.
Which is,
so that was the point.
That was the point.
So you hit the point of breath work. And so how do you get to the point? Because again, you're coming up in an era way different. Like right now you tell someone, oh, I've done magic mushrooms. Yeah. Normal.
Totally
Back then.
No, man.
Exactly.
I lived through the war on drugs. Exactly. Like every cartoon break would show this is your brain on drugs.
Exactly.
Right?
This is
like,
what
don't
I'm
do
saying.
drugs.
Like,
so actually I've never done hard drugs because I was programmed
against
no hard drugs.
No drugs, no drugs, no drugs.
But it was listening to other guys like Aubrey, like Rogan, and other friends that had done the spiritual type drugs.
Yes.
And I watched their transformation.
Yes.
And I'd be like, all right, that speaks to me. But I didn't understand it because to me, I was still trying to intellectualize what had happened to them. But then when I did breath work with Jan Menzel, it cracked me open so much that I was like, yes, that's the proof that there's some other place, that there's some other rules, that there's some other way to play this game. And then that just cracked open everything. And then I did an 8-gram psilocybin journey.
Excellent.
And that just, yeah. So like, that was it. And like, after I did that, I was like,
I can
all right,
relate.
like, let's go. Like, let's go.
Yeah. Like I can relate to that. Like
guided journey. Yeah. Cause like for anyone listening or watching, 8 grams is like beyond a hero dose. That's like 2 times what you would normally take on your own. Let's just guide it in a professional setting.
Okay. So breath work opened the rabbit hole for me.
Okay.
And I was like, let's go. And then I started reading everything because I was still trying to intellectualize it. But the breath work gave me a little bit of that etheric that there's something else. Like this, the visions I was getting, I was suddenly getting downloads. Why is my body full of energy? What's happening to me? Why am I vibrating? And it was like craziness, fear, excitement, truth. Whoa. Are we all being lied to? I went through all those places.
Yes.
And then I was like, I have way too many questions.
Yeah.
And so then I was introduced to a shaman and I sat with him. I would call it as professional as it could be. Like not professional in like clinical, but just like the guy's world class.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Like when I'm around him, I'm like, what's happening to me? Why do I have all this energy? Like, why would I feel so calm? How do I feel like I've known you for 5,000 years? It's amazing. And 8 grams will crack you open.
Oh yeah.
And it did. Nothing's been the same since. But now it's like, let's go deeper because I have the proof that there's this other side. And so that gave me the confidence to go deeper. And then I started to realize that this is not an intellectual pursuit. I've been intellectualizing my life, trying to figure out these games, figure out intellectual game of life, playing all these games, and then realizing the inner game is not intellectual. It's experiential. You must experience it. And that's when I was like, okay, well, there's only one way to play this game is to be the player.
So you have your 8-gram mushroom trip.
Yeah.
Now the trajectory of life has completely changed.
Completely changed.
Okay. Where, like, do you mind sharing any specific moment in the 8-gram trip? Because I know these trips can be extremely intimate moments.
Yes.
Was there something in there that was like...
All of it.
Got it. Was it like, were you blindfolded? Like, is it an inward trip or...
Total inward trip, multiple hours, completely blindfolded,
Visions.
music, frequencies, ceremony before, ceremony leading up to the weeks up to it, after, just like loads of downloads and journaling after, recalibrating.
How's the integration process?
Well, that's it. That's what I realized was like, wow, I'm getting all these messages and all these truths. I need to integrate it. I need to embody it. And the more I started doing that, the more I started realizing that's the cheat code.
Yes.
It's like the medicine / drugs is just a portal. Breath work, also super powerful. Sound healing, powerful. Ecstatic dance, powerful. Being around certain people, like all these things are powerful, but if you don't integrate, what's the point? And so what I realized was integration was the cheat code. And so be like, am I honoring the downloads? I had heard Aubrey talk about that. I heard Rogan talk about that, where like they get these messages and it's like, do you put them in action or not, or you dismiss them? And so I just started going back to the stuff that I was writing down. Cause like that first night after the 8 grams, I wrote down stuff in the dark.
Yeah.
Cause it's just like, I couldn't sleep and I was just furiously writing with no lights on. It was just coming out of me.
Yeah.
And I read it later. Well, first of all, it's almost impossible to read because it's hilarious, right? Plus my writing just looks like that anyway. It was like a lot of drawings and like sayings and stuff like that. And then I was like, okay, like where did this come from?
Yeah.
What happens if I start putting this into play? And so the last 5 years now has been this journey of building up the courage to put the downloads into play, to take action on those.
Okay.
And the more I've done that, I've done 3 of those 8 gram journeys now, and they all stack together and they just help me go deeper and get more answers and more truth and more guidance on live this way. And it's like build up that muscle to receive all the downloads and the nudges that the field is giving you at all moments. All moments. There's so many messages coming through. And then it's like, okay, can you sense them? Can you discern them? And then what to take action on? And that's what's been the journey now. That's the inward journey, but it's experiential, not intellectual. And so it's like that heart mind cohesion. I had it backwards my whole life, right? I was like thinking my way through everything. Right. Trying to love at stuff. Right. And then I realized, no, it's actually a frequency. It's not intellectual. It's a frequency. And it's like, that's what I noticed on the medicine. It cracks you open to a new frequency and you start feeling the world differently. And then you can actually start to recognize synchronicities. You can hear them, you can see them, but then I started to feel them. The more medicine I did, I actually started to feel them in my body. And I was like, this feels more wise than the shit I'm making up in my head.
Right. Because your brain, you'll lie to yourself all day, every day.
Yeah.
And believe pre-programmed things about yourself, about others, whatever. You're just always running stories, most of which are just based in.
So that's what the psilocybin did, is it stopped stories, right, or showed me a new framing of those stories. So I took stories I'd been running forever.
Yep.
Yeah. So
and in a few hours, had a completely different perspective on them, changed the meaning of them, which means they released differently. They were stored differently in my body. And I was like, wow, like I now look at my entire life to this point completely differently. So I reprogrammed my memories.
Amazing.
So like, that's a cheat code right there. And then, so I started realizing, okay, so all those programs you were running, what happens if you just turn them off and don't run them anymore?
Right? Seems so simple, right?
Right. But it's just like, you just got shown ones you can tweak and change. So then I just started learning to turn them off. Right. So that's work. That's constant work because they still come up. Right. But I've turned so many off that they just don't run anymore. But then it's like, okay, now that you have this space, what do you turn on? How do you make decisions? And so what I realized is my whole life I was seeking this, but that's why I went into all those games, especially around a lot of successful men. I was looking for the cheat codes and I saw enough of them attempting their version of that to realize you're a world-class player. You're a world-class player. You're a world-class at this game, but we're in the wrong game. So I was seeking with, and like trying to learn their frameworks. What do you do? Yeah. How do you, like even I got really into biohacking for a long time before I did medicine. Yeah. Because I thought that was it. It was like, what's your crush your morning routine? Make your bed, which I still do. Yeah. And it's like all those things, right? Yeah. And I approached it from the biohacker's perspective, mindset, this and that. I had every book on the planet for self-help. Yeah. But then I just realized is like, we've got a framework for that life that is very different than the framework I do now for the inner work. Yeah. Because it's experiential, not intellectual. And so I switched up how I make decisions and how I govern. Because once you turn off your programming, what do you run? So in a moment, how do you govern your life? Most of us don't realize that every moment that we experience, we just auto run the program we're supposed to in that moment. The one we're told, the one we've been carrying, maybe the one injected in our DNA for generations, the one we're supposed to clear. whatever, we run these programs. And so I started realizing how to stop them, but then what do you start? And that's when you realize, oh shit, I'm actually the alchemist. I'm actually in control. And who teaches you what to start? In the absence of program, you have the freedom to start something. What do you pick? And that's what's the last few years have been, is to learn that.
You said something really interesting that I kind of want to go back to. You said you need to have the courage to implement the downloads or to integrate correctly.
Yes.
So why courage specifically? Why would you use the word courage? And what kind of advice would you give to someone? Because I know a lot of people who are now interested in the space. They want to do psychedelics. They want to get into it.
Yeah.
And, a lot of the times I find like people who are like, they just want to keep going back into the trip, not realizing that it's about the integration process.
Yes.
What kind of advice would you give to that person? And how do you build that courage? And what are the outcomes you've got because of that?
Yeah. So when I was at Fit for Service just recently in Montana, we had this really beautiful talk about this. And so something I started was like, okay, what do you want to talk about today? And I was like, I've been really thinking about courage. And what I realized is we naturally have courage. If you think about like watching a baby or watching young kids, because I had just recently been taking care of my nephews and just see like what they're courageous about and what's already been turned off in them versus a baby that when it's trying to walk,
fearless,
it just keeps going.
Yeah.
So we all started with that. So we had it. And then I believe that's our nature. And then we nurtured out of it because we're layering stories on top, or programs start running as we age into it. Programs handed to us by our upbringing, that first 7 years, whatever's in our DNA,
100%.
our whole environment, right? And so we layered this bullshit on top, and we forgot that we're courageous and we want to express, which is why babies just keep going. There's not a baby that falls over once and it's like, I'm out.
Yeah, no more walking from.
And every one of us listening to this right now, we have shit that we fell over trying it, and we're like, we're out. Right? Yeah. Just think about that right now. So whoever's listening, whatever just popped in your head, think about that, because there's something that you fell down one time and you chose through your nurturing to bow out. When you were a baby, you kept going.
Yep.
Okay. So I was thinking about all that. And then prior to my third 8-gram journey, my intention that I was leading up to, because I knew I was doing it weeks in advance, clearing out the body, doing all those wonderful things. I was going on integration walks to get the intention.
Right.
And so I was like, my intention is going to be abundance. And then that morning I was like, abundance is the outcome.
Yeah.
And
the intention.
I'd been listening to Jordan Peterson's latest book about a whole bunch of things. But one of the things he talks about is, do you have the courage to do these things anyway? So it's like, do you have the courage despite your upbringing? Do you have the courage despite your programming?
Yes.
Right. So it's who could you be?
Yeah.
Not who do you want to be? Who do you dream to be? It's like, who could you be? That's the question that he starts with. And what really hit with me when I was listening to that, I was like, it was the could, because the minute you say to someone, who could you be? We already know the answer. It comes in.
Yeah.
Because we know what we're capable of. And then we've got some layered bullshit story on top, like the kid, right? It's like the nurture. The nurture is layered on top. And so I started thinking about, okay, who could I be if I actually listened to the whispers and the omens and the nudges that I'm getting? Who could I be if I tapped into that kind of feminine side of the energy, just from an energy perspective, not biology? If I trusted the magic more, if I trusted the medicine more?
Yeah.
Who could I be if I didn't run my fear programs?
Yeah.
Who could it be if I didn't identify with my upbringing? Who could I, and just kept going through it.
Yeah.
And I realized that abundance is an outcome, but it requires that courage.
Okay.
The courage is first. So what's the action? And so I switched my intention from the outcome to the action that brings the outcome. And then I explained that to the shaman, and he started crying, and he's like, I need to tell more people about this that are coming into the medicine because it's about that action to be courageous. The action of taking those downloads and putting them into the 3D.
Yeah.
And so when I went into that journey that day, it was all about that. It was showing me what is possible when you're courageous. And it was from heart center. It was from higher frequency. And it was telling me in scene after scene that the heart frequency is the strongest frequency, and that love in that way, not intellectual love, but the love frequency is the most powerful. And that if you have the courage to make decisions from there, this is what will happen. And it showed me what the world looks like, what my world would look like, what other people's world, what the world would look like if you made decisions from there.
And it's all based on that feeling you get. That's just like, it's internal. It's like when you know something to be true, as you say, it's like you feel it. If someone speaks truth to you and you know it to be true, you'll feel it.
Yes.
And you just follow what feels right. And it's funny because Rick Rubin just released a book around this, and his whole life has just been doing what feels right.
And it sounds ridiculous when he tries to explain it. It sounds so
ridiculous because he's like, I've been reading the book, and it's fantastic the way he's written it. It's just his whole career has been based on a feeling. He started producing hip hop music because it didn't sound the way on, like, when they released records on the radio, it didn't sound like it did at the live shows he was going to. And he's like, I just want it to sound like that. So he started making records with his cassette players, stereo. And that's what got him into the music industry. He can't compose a song to save his life, but he knows what feels right. And when he's in the studio, that's the only thing he listens to. And he talks about seeing the synchronicities in life and the beauty of life and being open to receive all the downloads and information that's around you by not being busy looking at the wrong things or following a certain programming you've been ascribed.
Bingo.
And going for walks. That's a big thing he does. Every morning he goes for a walk along the
same, because that helps me clear off the tower and get clear. And so
you walk a lot.
I walk about 15,000 to 30,000 steps a day.
So I was going to ask you, what are some things that you do to clear, to make room for that, because you got to be able to, it's hard to feel something if you're busy.
Yeah.
Right. If I'm busy work all day long, I got appointments, I got this, I got to get my hair cut, I got my friend's wedding tomorrow. This is literally my schedule. I got my friend's wedding tomorrow. I got work on Monday. I got a podcast today.
Yes.
It's hard to like stop and feel. What are some things that you do to create that space?
Yeah. The hard part isn't stopping. The hard part is choosing the higher alignment that you already know is pulsing through you.
Okay.
And having that supersede all the other bullshit.
Gotcha.
And so what I had to teach myself, that stillness is an action. Now, the way that I receive stillness is not sitting and meditating.
Yeah.
It's actually walking.
Gotcha.
So even walking amongst a chaotic city brings me the stillness because I'm receiving downloads and nudges when I do that. And there's lots of books out there. There's an artist, writer named Mason Curry, not Jason, Mason. And he has a book. I always forget the title, but I know it's his. And we can get it in the notes or whatever. But like, it really impacted me because it has like the biography of like 400 artists of different sorts, famous writers, famous poets, things like that. Names we remember because we pretty much don't remember anybody. And it was doing their morning routines and their daily routines. And so I read this thing multiple times, and it was before plant medicine that I read this, but it was giving me the confidence that taking time in your day to go walk and contemplate was a cheat code. And when you read that book, you'll see that back, some of them are from 16, 17, 1800s, 1900s, where they've captured their routines. And the number one through line for almost everyone in that book,
go for a walk.
They take a break every day and go for a walk.
Interesting.
I know that. I know it because I know like there's so many times.
That's when I really started it. Yeah.
Oh man, like I just need to go for a walk. And you go for a walk, and for some reason, just going for a walk, you get what you need to get.
You get what you need to get. And so what I realized was the cheat code wasn't more action. It was aligned action.
Okay.
And so when I get the downloads, like we were talking about, I'm watching those guys process in real time. Sometimes I need some processing time for the download. So it's like, go for the walk and get clear. Because when you have freedom to start making your own choices because you've turned off so much nonsense, what are you going to choose? What's the real wisdom? And the more I did that, the more the wisdom actually came into my body where I could feel it. And now it's like, I know, it's like, so when I'm always laughing about following the nudges, I visually see a lot of them. Synchronicities, people will walk up to you that you're just thinking about. That shit happens to me all the time. You've experienced it, Ryan, with me so many times. That's why we're here, right? We wouldn't be sitting on this couch if that didn't happen with you and I standing next to each other.
True.
But and there's lots of people that talk about this in their own journey. when you get cracked open to the medicine, you start trusting that field more, stuff opens up. So I hear differently. People sound differently to me. I can feel energy now, which sounds so ridiculous to like my former self, right? But it's like, it's not, because I see other people when I tell them, and it happens to them, there's that immediate bond of like, you too. And I'm like, yeah. And it's like, yeah. If it can happen to a guy like me, then I believe we all have this, but we have so much programming distracting us that we can't tap into it. We can, but there's some other stories that are superseding and winning the moment that we're so distracted by. Yeah. Now, I got lucky because I got to the point where I was watching all my distractions be played out better than I ever could by other people. And so I was like,
so you're in a front row seat.
I got a front,
so what your life
front row
could
seat.
be.
Yep. To be like, that's where you're going.
Or what you thought you wanted it to be.
Yep.
And it was enough to be like, oh shit, this isn't it.
That's not it.
That's not actually what I want.
Yeah.
Because you're observing what it actually means to be that.
I got to observe it at the highest levels and realize, okay, there's so much of that that's awesome. Like, look, I've been on the private jet. It's way fucking better than coach. Like it just is. It just is. Right. Right. I had the Porsche. They're fucking great. Like it's great. But I've been shown through my own journeys that we're meant to build from a higher frequency. And that doesn't mean we have to shun beautifully crafted things or abundance. It's just energy. It's just another form of energy. And that's part of my journey now, is like rebuilding my life this way and learning to live from, having the courage to live from the heart frequency, make decisions from there versus the intellectual life that I was living, things that I was chasing, looking to accumulate things. Now I just, life has switched so much for me from looking to get the thing outside of me, somewhere I need to go get it, to now I am it. And what I emanate reverberates back to me. And the more I do that, the more the field reverberates back to me. The more I walk around reverberating that, I get more messages, more awesome people just show up. Synchronicities happen, things go faster. So by going slower, everything goes faster. You and I talk about this a lot.
All the time. And it's
taking the rockets to the ship instead of the stairs. So when I actually honor the day by being still to receive, which I've learned is more of that feminine energy, the wisdom of source, it flows through and it'll actually make everything faster. But you have to have the courage to act on it.
And to trust.
And to trust.
That
and
is
to integrate.
Happening.
And trust that however that's forming for you is better than your plans. It's better than the post-it notes on the wall. It's better than
always
the stuff I'm writing down and saying it has to go this way. And so because I turned off so much of my own bullshit programming, I didn't have a plan. And so I was like, okay, if Michael Singer can do this from Untethered Soul and Surrender Experiment, why don't I try it? And so what I started trying was, what happens if I let the field decide instead of me? And so if you think about it from a founder startup perspective, I was like, okay, my new co-founder is Source, is God. What happens if I do that? And now everybody that I coach, I ask them like, why don't you have that on your team?
Right.
And
I can speak to that because I mean, I'm one of your mentees, I guess you would say. And you've like helped shift my whole perspective on life and the way I conduct business and everything. And literally my life has changed as a result of a number of conversations we've had before I even started coaching with you, like, which is crazy. It's just so many of these things you're talking about, like I felt and experienced, and not just me, but you know, my girlfriend Autumn now is experiencing, and it's not funny, but it's just so amazing to see the shift and just stop trying to intellectualize everything and figure everything out on paper. Because more often than not, it never goes the way you think it's going to go. It actually never goes the way you think.
Never does.
It never.
You're just using your limited imagination to play out scenarios that are not real. essentially.
Right. Exactly. It's like, you know better.
Yeah.
That's where you get caught up. It's like, I know best. We know nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I
Right.
mean?
So that, like, I talk about this a lot because if you listen to autobiographies, which I love, I spent my whole life like reading and accumulating. That's when I realized there was Phil Knight that I was into because I knew his story so well.
Yeah.
And other leaders. And we think their story and the reason they won at life, and our perception of that, is through resiliency and effort and perseverance, and that it was hard. And I call that now warrior mode because I live that world. I would live that world too. Right. So everything's a battle. I was in sales, tech sales.
Yeah.
Every guy in there is like former jock pretty much. And it's like every Monday morning, we're using sports analogies to describe our fucking sales deal. Okay.
Yeah.
When I started going on this path of that way, I started to realize like to follow that nudges and to follow the energy, it like requires a completely different game and a way of looking at it. And I realized my energy precedes me and that I had it backwards.
Yeah.
And that I used to think stuff will show up once I accumulate it. So once I chase something and go get it, then it'll appear. And it's the other way around. It's like it comes from me. Okay. Now, when you listen to all the leaders, all the ones that we think matter, we listen to their story, we hear about their perseverance and their resilience.
Yeah.
But when you really listen to their story, they have these magic moments, like me walking into a recruiting company and taking a test and them being like, okay, you're hired.
Yeah.
Right. And so the magic dots, which is what is following the nudges, they appear for everybody. But we think it was the effort in between that brought them.
Right.
And when you listen to Michael Singer and what I'm up to now, I'm actually proving that the efforting and the distraction, the busy being busy in between those magic dots for all of us, we're making that part up. And that when you look at your life backwards, it was the magic dots that did it all. When you read an autobiography, you typically hear about the strife that they went through, but there's all these lucky serendipitous moments sprinkled throughout.
Yeah.
And I think you can actually stitch those together way faster. And that's when you realize that when you put out that energy and you trust the field and you take space to observe it, you can feel them more and they show up faster. And it forms in a way better plan than you could have. And that's why I laugh when people make these plans and like, it's going to go this way and it's going to go exactly that way. And it never does.
No,
because it can't, because there's a better plan. It's because every decision we make, the field flips. Okay. And so when you're saying, hey, I got these Post-it notes on my wall and this is how it's going to go. Yeah. But go back and look, did it actually follow your Post-its or was there some sort of magic serendipitous moment that happened?
Yeah.
And so the real question is, are you sure you need all those hash mark moments in between? Do you need all those Post-its for it to be true?
Yeah.
For it to come to fruition? What would happen if you had the courage and surrender a little to letting it come faster through more serendipity, through more people showing up that have exactly what you need? And what I've noticed is that the more people that start to do this, it comes faster. And the exact person you need shows up.
100%.
Or the exact opportunity shows up. And I can trace that all the way back now. So going to like the Mason Curry book and seeing those 400 journeys, reading all those autobiographies, listening to Phil Knight's story, you can pick apart where those magic serendipitous moments happened.
Right.
So what happens if you switch your effort and your efforting more to allowing the magic to appear for you, allowing the synchronicities to come in, and you spend more of your day clearing off your tower, clearing off your energy, feeling into that higher alignment, that, you know, like how you feel after breath work or ecstatic dance, doing those modalities that put you in that place. What if we did that first and most? What would happen if you actually trusted that by you holding into that alignment, that exactly what you need is going to show up better than you could ever plan?
So what this is your, I guess your advice for people is to how to get out of your way is to shift yourself into those higher vibrations or higher frequencies.
Yes.
And spending like the work you should be doing is that work.
That work supersedes the other work.
Okay. Rather than the work of firing off 150 emails or
right.
I don't know, whatever it is, whatever your grind is,
yes.
rather than putting your effort there, why don't you put your effort a little bit more into inwards?
Yes.
Kind of learning how to develop a relationship with your body, with your feelings, and understanding what you're feeling, why you're feeling it, and following that.
Yeah.
Yes. And like what wants to come through you.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So everyone even listening to this, there's stuff ruminating where it's like they're getting downloads. And I believe, especially when you've been on a plant medicine journey, got cracked open.
Yeah.
I see so many people not integrating.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where I think you should really take that action and trust more. And we don't know how to trust. We don't have the courage of trust. So what we think is, when I don't know what to do next, I go into effort mode.
I got to figure it out.
When a wall comes up in life, we're taught, go over it, plow through it, right? Keep bashing your head against the wall. It's celebrated.
Yeah.
What if the wall means that's the edge of your part in this, and that someone else is supposed to come next to fill that in for you? What would happen if you just looked at a wall and being like, okay, this isn't for me to plow through. It's for me to go back to what I'm actually meant to do, what I'm actually meant to express. And that's where I think, like, you know, there's a lot of talk in all these spiritual communities about your dharma. That's right. What is it that it is just bursting out of you that you can feel and or denying because you're telling yourself that can't be the path? What happens if you just let that out a little bit? And what happens if you let the field bring more synchronicities to make that even more flourish?
Yeah.
And what I've noticed when you start doing it, because there's a lot of people I know doing this now, their lives are transforming at unfathomable rates, and just ridiculous stuff is happening.
Yep. I can speak to that.
Right. Yeah. And the synchronicities have their own timeline. And it's like, when you allow that in, they just show up. And I have ridiculous stories every day about it. And it just builds up that confidence, that courage muscle to be like, this can be the way.
And like you always say, like, you are the proof you need.
Yes.
If you look back on your life and you observe these magic moments, you start to believe, like, oh shit, like, I already know what I'm supposed to be doing. I can feel it. What my therapist always says is, like, your intuition will never steer you wrong. Your intuition always has your best interests at heart. It will never take you in the wrong direction. And so many times, I'm sure so many people can relate to this, where you have a feeling like, you know, you're supposed to do something. And then you're like, I know better. I'm going to go do this thing instead. And then you take the long way, probably get hurt along the way or whatever happens. And then it brings you right back to that point where you knew exactly what you were supposed to do. It's like, okay, you tried it your way.
Yeah.
You want to try it this way now? And it's just so easy. If you had just listened and followed that instinct from the beginning, you would have been well on your way. And I've had that happen so many times in my life. And now that I'm starting to observe and trust and live my life from a place of feeling, my life has completely transformed. And that was one of the key conversations we had outside of Impact, of all places, of course, across from Mothership, of course. It was about looking back on my life and connecting the dots, and you telling me, could you have ever predicted being here right now based on everything? I was like, there's no way. A year ago, like before we met, I never would have predicted that I'd be sitting at that table talking to you about this stuff.
Yeah.
Same. I can't believe it either. I used to be, you know, smashing vodkas at 5 p.m. every night with smooshing somebody.
Yeah.
Right.
It just doesn't make any sense. And like, I don't know, like, even just the first time I went to Unbounded, and like, I knew I needed to do something coming out of the pandemic. I was like, I need to go and do something. My body's craving this. I don't know what's happening. I just need to do it. And I was missing a sense of community. I'm like, maybe this is it, which led to, you know, Othership, another thing. I was like, I know this feels right. I need to do it. And it's led to so many beautiful things just because I followed that feeling. And just like so many things in life where you just like, oh yeah, I'm just going to do what feels right.
Where I need to be.
Exactly. You're always exactly where you need to be. It's just, what energy are you bringing to that?
So I want you to touch a little bit on discipline and struggle in this journey, because for a lot of people, it sounds like woo magic.
Yeah.
But if you hit those two elements, struggle and discipline, these are two things that we know are life. These are like cornerstone foundations of life. How do those two things tie into what you're talking about? Where where does struggle come in and where does discipline come in order to tap in?
Yeah. When I run into struggle now, before I would be like, why is this happening to me?
Yes.
What was me? Oh, fuck, I got to blast through again.
Yeah.
Right. Now when struggle comes, I'm like, okay, what's the message here?
Yeah. A reframe.
Reframe. Why does this feel like struggle?
Yeah.
And what I'm realizing is that when the struggle comes, now it feels like, because this, go back, you're off the path. Go back, you're out of, this is where you're actually not on the path that you're meant to be.
So when you feel resistance,
when I feel resistance now, it's such a gift.
Okay. You could say it's a nudge. It's to put you back.
It's like the anti-nudge. It's like, okay. So the way I look at it now is whether we like it or not, and whether we believe it or not, we're all energy.
Yes.
We're emanating a certain frequency at all times.
Yeah.
And we have a choice of what that frequency is. And through the plant medicine, all these modalities like breath work and things like that, I started to realize that it exists and that I can get in control of it.
Yeah.
Now that requires some discipline.
Yes.
I call it clearing off the tower.
Yeah.
Right. So for me, getting a walk in really helps. There's certain mantras or meditations I can just call on, makes it easier. Breath work, massive cheat code.
Yes.
What are you eating? Where's your mindset at? What programs are you running? Like all those all the things that we all know, but you got to find your own playbook.
Yeah.
Right. Like I can tell you all the things I do, but yours is going to be a different mix.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I realize now is my energy always precedes me, whether I want that to be a rule or not, it just is.
Yeah.
And so now I'm always in alignment, whether I believe I am or not.
Okay.
And so whatever I'm putting out, I'm going to keep receiving more of that right back. And so the real question is, are you in alignment on a higher version of you or a lower version of you?
Got it.
And what I realized is I was living in a lower version of me all those years. And I would fluctuate up and down and depending on my version of success and all those games I witnessed. But what I realized is those games, you're just eventually being the highest version, but still of your lower self. Because we're living life outside of us where it's something I have to go accumulate. But when you start going inward and you realize, no, actually it all starts from me outwards. That's where the discipline comes in, where it's recognizing I go first. I used to think someone else would have to do something, for me, or it's like, you're the reason I suck, or you're the reason I'm not getting what I want or whatever. But it starts with us. That's what's backwards in society. We don't take pride right now in that it starts with us.
Right.
And people that feel that need to help others and put themselves second, they don't realize that typically a lot of that is actually a saving energy or they actually feel like the victim inside, even though they're doing something beautiful for somebody else.
Yeah.
And so what I realized, the best version of me actually serves the world. And so that's where that discipline comes in. And so when the struggle hits, now my question is this actually the best thing for me? Or is that the nudge to go back to your Dharma path, go back to the nudges, go back to where you feel that alignment? And so to understand the alignment, you need to know what are those downloads? What are the things that want to come through you, that want to express? If we're just constantly expressing a version of our consciousness at all times, whether we like it or not, we're the energy tower sending out frequency, then which version are you going to choose?
Yeah.
And so when you clear up that space of all those distractions that we're all chasing and you can make a choice, then it's like, okay, where do I get the wisdom of what choice?
Yeah.
And so that's when I realized, how do you serve the collective? That's what seems to be for me.
Okay.
So helping other people unlock this lights me up.
Yeah.
So when I'm helping someone else find what the wisdom is that's coming through them, what is their dharmic path? What is the thing that just wants to express to them and the repeating cycles? And I can basically hear it when I talk to them long enough. There's the thing you're meant to do that I can hear. And then there's all the other bullshit you're layered on top that's distracting you from that path and the stories you're telling yourself. And it's almost always that you have to get something first before you can feel the thing. Like that's the common
pattern. You see that people like, I need this before this.
Yeah. So what I realized is I tried to go away and like shun all the stuff that I was used to be up to, but I was like, no, that's not the path. Like we're in 3D.
Yeah.
And so there's all these people doing the spiritual stuff and wearing the robes and getting the beard. I had all that. It's awesome. Right.
Yeah.
But it's like, what's the point if we're not going to apply it back where you're from and in the world and in these cities and with everyone that you grew up with and everything else. And I started realizing, okay, what's the practical application of this? And that's when I just realized you can apply this framework exactly into the 3D, exactly into this world, which is your energy precedes you. you go first. So the best version of you isn't necessarily from biohacking. Maybe that puts you into alignment, but it's what's frequency are you sending out?
Yeah.
Do you feel in lack, in scarcity, in war, that the world's against you? Do you feel like everything's happening to you? If you do, that's the frequency you're going to keep sending out. And you're going to keep getting the nudge and lesson back saying, here you go.
Yeah.
You feel like you're the victim? Here it is for you.
Yeah.
Because your inner world reflects your outer world.
That's right.
And people who are miserable, they're always encountering bad things.
Yes.
Always problems in their life. Oh, you'll never believe what happened to me now. You'll never believe what happened to me now. Like, and I was surrounded by this when I worked at certain places, and people just complain all day, every day. And then every week there's just a litany of problems happening. And it's like, but now being able to observe it from the outside and seeing these loops that are running, you realize like you're just running loops. You're just running patterns.
Running the patterns.
You're putting that energy out and it's coming back to you.
Okay. So one step further to that, that's where the discipline now is, where I realize when I get non-preferred sent back to me, or the wall or the struggle, now I realize, yes, that's beautiful, because it's telling me to go back to my true path.
Mm-hmm.
It's not happening to me. It's for me. It's for you to go back to your path. Now, most of us are so addicted to outward in. I got to go get something. Those patterns are so strong, like mine were so strong all those years, that we don't realize that why it's coming back in non-preferred is to teach you that there is a preference. There is a path for you that is more aligned, that is going to light you up, that you won't need willpower to do. That'll just emanate out of you. There's something that wants to express through you, by you. And we all have that. The little whispers. Mm-hmm. Alchemist calls them omens.
Yes.
I call them nudges. They're all there. Now, plant medicine and breath work and those things, they crack it open and give you a whole bunch at once.
Yes.
We all have it, but we have it backwards. And what you realize is the anti-nudges is your beautiful guide to what your nudge actually is. Mm-hmm. And that was the cheat code unlock for me of how to practically apply this. Mm-hmm. To apply the wisdom that's coming through. And then can you have the courage to make decisions from there versus your typical programming? And the more I do it, the more it shows up. And the more I teach others, the more it shows up for them, which lights me up. And I'm like, there it is. Yeah. So I put it out and it comes back. And I put it out and it comes back. And so learning to live that way is just fascinating. And now I feel like we're meant to teach the others exactly from where we came from, that this is possible. Yeah. And it's like, we can have all this beautiful abundance and architecture and awesome things, and Porsches are okay.
Yeah.
But how did it come to your life? Did your energy precede you and that's part of the attraction that came back? Or is that what you need to validate your lower self because you don't feel complete?
Right.
Yeah.
Before, when I had it, it was because I thought it was cool and I thought it would validate, look, I made it.
Yes.
Right? Made what?
Yeah.
Right?
Made what? That's a good question.
Right?
Oh, exactly.
Made what?
It's like, what does it represent?
What does it represent? But I also want to be honest, like they're super fun.
Of course.
Right? They're great.
Of course.
But it's like, what's the energy associated to it?
Yeah.
And what's the meaning assigned to it? So if you go back to what we were talking about before, is like, through plant medicine, I've rearranged all the meaning of all the things that have ever happened to me. Mm-hmm. And so the way I look at it now is, you get so tapped into the field that I get so activated every day that I believe that means I'm exactly where I'm meant to be, that I get the proof with the tingles like we've had while we're even talking. Yeah. Right. It actually reverberates mostly in my Jaguar tattoo, which is hilarious to me. It's like the cosmic joke, right? Like a little nudge to say, here you go. We're with you. And so by feeling that every day, I feel that is the proof that this is exactly where I'm meant to be, right here with you guys.
Yeah.
Right. So that means I can just get rid of my entire past and just make peace with it and be like, no matter what my association to is, I needed all that to transpire to be sitting right here. Mm-hmm. So why don't I just choose that was all beautiful? Mm-hmm. Now I can let go of my past, which frees up RAM to be present and to feel the nudges. Mm-hmm. So it's like every day now, the practical application is turn off all the bullshit that's ever happened, all the stories that ever happened, honor it with beauty. And then every day I get the proof, even when I'm like, does this shit really work? I get so much proof every day that it's just like, okay, like, let's go. Like, let's keep going. And that's when you hear with Michael Singer's story, it sounds so absurd, but he can't stop. And it's the same thing I see with a lot of my friends that are in these masterminds around the world or done the plant medicine. It's like the journey's wild, but we can't stop.
Right.
Because once you know, you can't go back.
No, you can't. Like, I can't even fathom going back to living a life I used to live. Now that I'm living this way, it doesn't even compute. And like when I'm around people, like going back to visit, you know, family and other people, friends that you used to have, or, you know, you're still acquainted with, and you just see the way they're living their life just in these loops. They're just doing what they think they're supposed to do because that's the way you're supposed to do it. And woe is me. I guess I'm not meant to be happy or successful or whatever it is. I'm just meant to have, it's just, this is how it is.
Yes.
This is how it is. Why should it be any different for me? This is how everyone does it. Right.
Yeah.
And that's just not it. Like you can literally do anything, like anything. And I never used to understand that. And now it's just like, oh yeah, no, I could do anything. Before I moved to Toronto from Windsor, like years ago, I told my brother, I'm going to have a podcast. I didn't know what it was about. I don't know no idea.
Yeah.
Here we are like 5 years later. I have a podcast.
Well,
but I didn't know how it was going to happen.
You just knew.
I just knew. I had a feeling. I'm like, you're going to see me on a podcast. I just don't know what it's going to be about or when, but it's happening. And he's like, yeah, all right. He's like, okay, cool. Here it is. And it's happening. It took 5 years.
Yeah.
But like every little step that came along the way led to this.
So what's another example that only came through the nudges that's now happening to you?
So like Othership, for instance, and getting ingrained in that whole community. And like, so coming out of COVID, I had no community. I had no friends, nothing. I didn't know anyone in the city. And I just knew that like I was called to like be around that energy, like-minded people doing these things. And I just had to do it. I was like, I have to do this. And yeah, it's just funny. Like it was just a front desk position, but like being there was my happy place because I was in a relationship that wasn't really, you know, serving me and all those things. Kind of touched on it on another podcast, but it's just, it felt right. And just being there in that environment led to so many opportunities to what I'm doing now as a video producer. It's just mind blowing. Like it led to a shoot with Dior. It led to, you know, traveling with Othership to LA, Secular Sabbath, experiencing all these things that I was always just like so closed off to because I didn't know what this world was. And it's led to, you know, hot and cold exposure, like, and the benefits of that and how much that's transformed me. It led to me meeting Autumn, you know, like just following the nudges, just doing what felt right. And it's just crazy how much everything has changed.
What's some advice you can give to someone who wants to get out of their own way? Let's give some let's give the listener some practical, here's some stuff you can do. If you're trying to get out of your way.
Okay. One of the things we suck at is understanding compound interest. And compound growth. And going back to that baby story. It's our nature to keep going when you fall down or you get non-preferred, right? Baby gets non-preferred, they keep going. Progress. Okay. What I see so much, especially in people doing spiritual community or trying to switch from like this intellectual self-development to the inner self-development, which can only be experiential.
Yes.
Right. You got to get in the game.
Yeah.
Living more from energy. Like that's it. That's what the inner world is showing us. Okay. So progress matters. And so what I see all the time, it's amazing, is because we just fucked up the math.
Yeah.
Okay. Because we're trained from high school and upbringing, especially in North America, to be graded down from 100.
Yeah.
It's like, what did you get wrong? Hey son, what'd you get wrong?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What, I got
entire upbringing.
Right?
Yeah,
I got 80%. I got 80%.
Yeah.
What happened to the other 20?
Exactly.
We all think that.
Yeah.
We're conditioned that way. So we're constantly, this is how our lives are organized. We're constantly looking at, why am I not perfect? I'm down from perfect. Oh, I'm at 80. I know someone at 90. I got to get to 90. I can't even celebrate being at 80. Okay. What we don't do is look at, where'd you start? What's your progress? Now, having gratitude for progress is a completely different frequency than the feeling of, I am in lack. I am scarcity down from 100. Okay. So now apply this to inner work. So I see this all the time. You'll go to like amazing Othership or do an unbounded thing. You're crushing the cold plunge for 100 days.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But then you tell yourself, well, man, I only did 3 minutes today. Should have done 5. You've now put a victim energy into a modality that can actually raise your consciousness.
Yeah.
Or it's like, I skipped my morning routine. I didn't have the perfect morning routine. Now the morning routine that can set up your whole day, that could put you into the higher frequency, you've now associated with it that you didn't crush it, or there's some sort of lack, or I only got a B. I only got 80% today. Versus you can look and have gratitude of, what would the old you have done this morning?
Yeah.
And be like, man, I'm shattered compared to that version of me. Sit with that gratitude. And that's a completely different energy.
Got it.
And so what we don't do is we don't honor progress really well. We're not wired that way. We're wired to look at our lives of what we don't have, what we haven't yet achieved.
Yeah.
It's the same thing that happened to me. I was seeing guys ahead of me.
Yeah.
I couldn't look at how far I've come. I wouldn't turn around and be like, other people would tell me, man, you have such an epic life. And every time they would say that, I'd be like, no, I don't.
Yeah.
Because like that guy has a jet.
Yeah.
Right. So it's that same thing. It's just a framing.
Yeah.
So a super practical way, especially for the inner work, is don't assign lack to the effort of the inner work. Don't assign scarcity to it. Really honor the progress. Because when you look at a compound growth chart, it goes up in the squiggly lines, but if it's directionally up and to the right, the compound effort over time is exponential. Yeah. We don't understand exponential math. And if we just moved our life to how awesome we are at progress versus how far away we are from perfection, everything will shift and the energy shifts.
Yeah.
And so that's something, a cheat code that I've learned, which has helped me integrate a lot faster than some of even people I love that are on the same path and they're doing more medicine and they spend way more time doing modalities. And I'm like, what's going on? And it's like this math framing is one of those cheat codes. And so if you just look at your progress, I know you're going to go up and down a little bit. You don't have to have the perfect day. I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk about this on a podcast and he was saying, like typically there's about 200 moments a day of 5-minute chunks.
Okay.
Yeah. And so when you start observing your life more from that, you
like
could even
5-minute chunks.
Yeah. You could even say there's 110-minute chunks.
Oh, okay. I like that.
Right. Okay. And then what you can start looking at is to say, all right, of my higher level modality that I just did, my 5 minutes in the ice, that's one chunk. What's my weighting of that? Right?
Yeah.
And then you can look at it and say, okay, if you have a moment in your life where it's something non-preferred, maybe getting an argument or the guy cuts you off in traffic or you're clearly lower self, victimhood, whatever, how many of us let that infiltrate so many more moments?
So many more of the other 5 minutes.
So many more of the 5 minutes. Okay. And so that's also where we're bad at math.
Yeah.
Okay. So people are like, how do I practically apply this stuff? And it's like, look at those two things. Is there a moment in your day that you're letting infiltrate many more moments?
Yeah.
Are you overweighting the negative ones versus the proof of magic? So one of the things we do with the coaching is I'm constantly asking everyone to report in on what synchronicities did you see? What omens did you see? What were the whispers? What were the downloads? What was the magic? Because honoring and articulating that moment puts it into the field and adds a weighting to it. Because what you want to do, the more you observe, the more it shows up.
The more it shows up.
Most people want to do is we blow off the magic serendipitous dots in our life.
Yeah.
We underweight those and we let a perception of negative moment or a moment of lack, a moment of scarcity, lower vibration. We let that infiltrate all these other moments.
Forever. People carry it.
For years and years and years. Okay. So we suck at, if you just switch the math around and gave this, even if you just gave the same weighting to a magic moment
and a negative
one, everything will start to change.
Yeah.
And so then the practical application is observe that of those 200 moments, hey, I used to have like 4 magical synchronicities, felt alive, felt in my alignment, felt in my Dharma moments.
Yeah.
Old me would have like maybe 4 a day. But now I'm getting like 17.
Yeah.
Now, if you go back to the other way of doing the math, you could look at it and be like, why don't I have 190?
Yeah.
Or you can be like, man, I went from 4 to 17. That is like world-class trajectory. And if you gave yourself enough space and grace and time and like real gratitude, if you charted that out, that 4 to 17, your future is so beautifully ordained to be just like unbelievably, unfathomably epic.
Yeah.
But we have the math wrong. And so we're actually doing higher level modalities, but because of our version of how we're analyzing our own self with shitty math.
Yeah.
We're actually reinforcing lower vibration against awesome things that we're doing.
Yeah.
So we're like denying the magic every day. We're denying the synchronicities that are showing up more. We're denying the downloads, or we're denying that the modalities that we've done, like crushing breath work or going for a walk and rearranging our life, we're not assigning the compound growth to it. And so then what we do is we start to shut it down. We go back to being the nurturer, where it's like the baby that falls down. It's like, I'm not trying to walk anymore. And that's not our nature.
Yeah.
So our actual nature is to keep progressing, but we got talked out of it by really shitty math.
Yeah. That's nice. I like that.
Oh yeah.
I like weighting that.
That's a game changer. That one right there.
Average. So you do coaching. What are you currently working on project wise? Coaching is like the main
thing. So it all trickles down from that.
Okay.
So I really feel compelled to help people unlock their gifts like this. So what is your path? What is trying to birth from you?
Yeah.
And that typically means I'm attracting a lot of founders and CEOs, especially coming from startup world, because I know so many people. But what a lot of people do is they'll have this download to create something, and it'll come through them to a point, and they'll get on their mission, maybe start a company, maybe it's startup, maybe their business has been running for a few years. But then the other stories start to win the day or win those moments. And you can realize that they're blocking something of their own on this path so that the thing they're trying to birth can really flourish.
Yeah.
They're taking the stairs, they're efforting, they're stuck. And so I really feel like my gift is to help them unlock that and take the rocket ship back to the whole reason they started this thing in the first place.
Yeah.
And so coaching them to get back to that, and then giving them these new rules and new frameworks so that they can bring their projects to life. Because I believe like we're just constantly emanating our energy and our consciousness.
Yeah.
And so helping them launch, flourish inside their companies, whether it's brand new or one that's 10 years old, but to do it from a higher consciousness and to like do a practical application of this spiritualism to their business.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like that. It's like, you don't have to give it all up and go live in Nosara, which is fucking cool.
Yeah.
But it's like, but you can express your consciousness from a higher level right now in anything you're choosing to be up to.
Yeah.
Like right now, it doesn't have to be something woo woo.
Yeah.
You don't have to go become a yogi.
Yeah.
Right. You can be a yogi right now in whatever business you already started. And so really helping founders, leaders, CEOs, people up to epic shit, unlock to a new level because we're in our own way.
Yeah.
So giving them the cheat codes to do that. And then because I know that their companies are going to flourish, then we also invest alongside them.
Yeah. That's dope.
Yeah.
I think where are we at right now? Almost an hour and a half?
Yeah. In a minute. It'll be an hour and a half. Yeah.
It was a great conversation. That's why it's flowing, but we're trying to hit that hour and a half mark.
Yeah.
Where can people find you, Jason? If they want to work with you, if they're looking for you online or they want to learn more.
So the website's Misfits Collective. Instagram 60 miles to go.
There we go.
Pretty on there quite a bit. Twitter, the Jason Brown. Yeah.
All right. Sweet. I mean, it was an awesome chat.
Absolutely.
I learned a lot. I think a lot of people are going to enjoy the content. Yeah, that's it. That's a wrap on our episode. Thank you so much for everyone who's listened.
Appreciate you. Appreciate you for coming on.
Like, subscribe, share, do all that good stuff, guys. Otherwise, stop listening to us. Just love you guys. We'll catch you guys on the next episode. Peace.
Later.
That was dope.